Hello. In this video, I read out the Japanese folktales in English. I would be happy if you could press the channel subscription and thumbs up now. Let's begin. Once upon a time, in the days of King Alfred the Great, in a rural house far from the city of London, a widowed woman lived alone with her little son, Jack. He was her only precious child, and although he was very carefree, lazy, and slothful, he was actually a very kind-hearted boy, so his mother called him Jack, day and night, and loved him so much that she wanted to put him in her eyes. She didn't let him do any work, and just let him play. In this way, with her lazy son, the widow somehow had bad luck. And year after year, she got bored. One winter, she sold her tools and other things, and spent all the money she had made, and the little money she had saved by living alone. Finally, the only thing left in the house that was worth anything was the cow. So one day, her mother called Jack and said, "It's so painful that it's like she's losing half her body, but we've finally had to give up that cow. I know it's a pain, but I want you to take the cow out and find a good buyer and sell it for as much as you can." So, Jack set out, pulling his cow. After walking for a while, the butcher's master came up to him. "Hey, boy, where are you going, pulling a cow?" the master called out. "I'm going to sell it," Jack replied. The master said, waving his hat in one hand. Heard of a rustling sound, Jack noticed, and when he looked inside his hat, he saw some odd-shaped beans flickering out of the bag. "Hey, what pretty beans," thought Jack, and for some reason he wanted them. The butcher's master saw him, and the butcher's master saw him, and he looked inside his hat, and saw some odd-shaped beans flickering out of the bag. "Hey, what pretty beans," thought Jack, and for some reason he wanted them. The butcher's master saw him, and he was about to see. Then, hoping to trick the somewhat timid boy, he purposely opened the bag and said, "Boy, this is what you want, isn't it?" Jack smiled broadly at this, but the boss shook his head reluctantly and said, No, these are strange, magic beans. Why can't I give them to you for free? How about we trade them for the cow?" Jack did as the man asked, and exchanged the cow for the bag of beans. Then, feeling that they had both made a great profit, they parted ways, feeling very pleased. Jack ran home with the bag of beans in his arms. When asked if he wanted to come in, Jack said, "Mother, today went really well." Then he ran out and told the story of the cow and the beans. However, instead of being happy to hear it, his mother scolded him severely. "Oh, what a fool you have done. I'm so shocked. You've been lured by this worthless bag of peas, and you've lost your precious cow and her young. Oh, my God, what shall we do with this foolish boy?" His mother was furious and threw all the beans out the window in disgust. Then, crying bitterly and pitifully, she began to cry. Jack thought his mother would be happy, but instead, he was shocked to see his mother looking so angry for the first time in his life, and he felt sad too. With nothing to eat, he went to bed early that night, feeling hungry. The next morning, Jack woke up and, although it was already dawn, he felt a little dreary, so he looked out the window. And lo and behold, the bean seed he had thrown into the garden the day before had sprouted, and overnight a thick, sturdy-looking bean plant had grown so tall it was almost towering over his head, filling the garden with lush growth. Surprised, Jack jumped up and went down into the garden. But what was this? The beanstalk was so tall, it reached up into the sky. The vines and leaves were intertwined, and it stood tall, penetrating the sky, like a ladder. If I climb up that to the top, I wonder how far I can get in. Total, Jack wondered, and he began to climb the ladder. As he climbed higher and higher, Jack's house got smaller and smaller under his eyes. Then, before he knew it, it was gone. But he still wasn't at the top. Jack felt a little sick, wondering how far he had to go. Still, he clung to the ladder with all his might and climbed up. He had climbed so high that his eyes became dizzy, his arms and legs were exhausted, he was numb and he was beginning to stagger. When he finally reached the top, Jack then first looked around. He saw that he was in a strange country, with a lush, blue forest. There was also a meadow with beautiful flowers in bloom. There was also a river with clear water flowing like fresh water. Jack had never imagined that such a beautiful country could exist above such a high sky, so he was stunned and just stood there in awe. Then, all of a sudden, an old woman with a strange face and a red hood appeared in front of him, as if she had come out of nowhere. Jack stared at the strange-looking old woman in a puzzled manner. But the old woman said in a gentle voice, "There's no need to be so surprised. I'm supposed to be the one who's been protecting you, but for the past 5 or 6 years I've been bound by a spell because of an evil creature, and I haven't been able to help you. But now that the spell has finally been broken, I'll be able to help you as I please." Hearing this out of the blue made Jack even more stunned. The fairy looked at his blank face with interest, and began to explain the reason in detail. To summarize it, it was something like this. Not far from here, there is a castle-like house where a terrible giant ogre lives. The ogre once killed your father, who lived in the castle, and took all of his treasures along with the castle, which caused your family to become very poor. And so you, poor baby, have been living a miserable life, held in your mother's arms. So it is your duty to take back the treasures and give the ogre a terrible life once more. Hearing this, the lazy Jack's heart began to take heart. He missed his father, whom he had never known, and decided that he had to punish the ogre and get back the treasure that had been stolen from him. With this thought, he felt so brave that he completely forgot how hungry and tired he was. So after thanking the witch and saying goodbye, he hurried off to the ogre's castle. As the sun began to sink in the west, Jack came to a house that was indeed as big as a castle. First, he knocked on the gate, and the ogre's wife, who only had one eye, came out. The ogre's wife, who had only one eye, was not impressed by Jack's evil face, but she felt sorry for Jack when she saw how hungry he looked. So, he shook his head in frustration and said, "No, no. I know it's annoying, but I can't stop you. This is the man-eating ogre's house, and if he finds you, he'll eat you right away instead of dinner. Please, Auntie, stop him. Without him finding out. I'm so tired I can't even walk another step," Jack said, pleading. "You're a helpless boy. I'll stop you for tonight, and come right back in the morning." Just as he was saying this, suddenly, thump, thump, the sound of footsteps so loud they shook the ground was heard. It was his master, the man-eating ogre, who had already returned from outside. The ogre master panicked and hid Jack in the hearth. As soon as the ogre entered the room, he suddenly snorted and shouted, "Humph! Hurrah! Hurrah! Here comes the Englishman. Whether dead or alive, I'll grind you all up, bones and all, and make bread out of you." The magistrate replied, "No, that's the smell of the people you caught and put in the clay pot." But the big ogre still looked around and sniffed. But he just couldn't find Jack. Finally he gave up and sat down on a chair. Then he started to eat and drink hungrily. As Jack peeked in, it continued to grow so big that he wondered when it would end, and Jack's eyes were wide open. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, he ordered the servant, "Hey, bring me a chicken." It was a strange chicken. He put it on the table, and the ogre said, "Lay," and it immediately laid a golden egg. The ogre said, "Lay," and it laid another golden egg. "Wow, what a special chicken. This must be Daddy's treasure," thought Jack as he peeked down from below. The ogre found it amusing, and laid more and more golden eggs. But then he seemed to get sleepy and snored so loudly that the wall moved when he sniffed. Jack saw that the ogre was fast asleep, and just as the ogre's master had gone into the kitchen, he quietly slipped out of the hearth. Then he ate the noodles on the table. He ran out of the castle with the bird in his arms. Then he ran on, and when he reached the ladder of the beanstalk, he ran smoothly back home. Jack's mother was worried that her son had been taken by a demon or a witch, but when he suddenly returned safely, she was so happy and excited. After that, thanks to the chicken that laid golden eggs that Jack brought back, her son became rich and happy. After a while, Jack wanted to go to the castle in the sky again. So one day, he pretended to be completely different this time and climbed the ladder of the beanstalk again. When Jack went to the demon's castle and knocked on the gate, the demon prince came out. Jack begged sadly again to be let in. The prince didn't seem to realize it was Jack, but he still waved his hand and said, "No, no. The other day, you stopped a poor kid just like you and took my master's precious chicken. Since then, every night, you've been telling me about it, and I've been getting scolded over and over again. I've had enough of being treated so badly again." Jack kept begging, and finally he let him in. Meanwhile, the big man came back, and sniffed about again, but Jack was hiding in the iron box, and he could not find him. Just like the last time, the big man had his fill of dinner, and this time, instead of a chicken that laid golden eggs, he had a bag full of gold and silver treasures brought out. He dumped them all on the table, counted them one by one, and then played with them as if they were marbles, making them jingle. After enjoying them for a while, he put them back in the bag and tied the string tight. Then he yawned so loudly that it reverberated through the ceiling, and fell asleep with a loud, gurgling snore. So, this time too, Jack slowly took himself out of the iron box and quickly ran away, clutching the bag full of gold and silver treasures in both arms. However, there was a little dog guarding the bag, which suddenly began to bark and howl. Jack thought that this time it was all over. However, the big man was still asleep, as if dead, and did not wake up. Jack ran on without looking back, until he reached the ladder of the beanstalk. Now, unlike the chicken, this time his bones broke trying to carry the heavy bag of gold and silver. Still, Jack persevered, and with 2 strokes of the ladder, he climbed down the beanstalk. At last, when he reached home, his mother was utterly disappointed to find Jack gone, and became very ill, and locked the door and went to bed. However, when she saw Jack's healthy face, she was as if a dead person had come back to life, and she gradually got better, and soon began to walk briskly. On top of that, when she heard that Jack had made a lot of money, she felt even better. And so Jack stayed quietly at home for a while again. Gradually, his whole body began to feel itchy. He wanted to go to bed again, and spent every day staring at the ladder of the beanstalk. And it bothered him, and he became more and more depressed. So, one day, Jack quietly climbed up the ladder of the beanstalk again. This time, his face and appearance had completely changed into that of a different child, so the Demon King was fooled again and let Jack in. Then, when the giant returned, Jack hurriedly hid him in the pot. The demon giant sniffed around the room, saying, HMPH, HMPH, it smells like a human. Then, this time, he said he'd find everything for him, and look through everything in the room. Finally, he put his hand on the lid of the pot where Jack was hiding. Jack was shaking with fear, thinking that this time it would be no good, but the giant suddenly changed his mind, sat down on the donkey, and said, "Oh well. I'm hungry. Let's have dinner." After dinner, the giant said to the servant, "The chickens have been taken, and the bags of gold and silver have been stolen. There's nothing I can do. Maybe I'll play the harp tonight." Jack opened the lid of the pot and looked inside, and saw a beautiful harp decorated with beads. The giant placed the harp on the table and said, "Play." Then the harp began to play by itself. And the beauty of the harp was so great that no musical instrument could compare to it. Jack wanted the harp more and more than the chicken with the golden eggs or the bag full of gold and silver. Soon, the ogre fell asleep in a good mood, with the music of the harp as a pleasant lullaby. Jack thought he had it covered, so he quietly slipped out of the pot and quickly ran away, picking up the harp. But unfortunately, the harp had been enchanted, and it immediately cried out in a loud voice, "Wake up, sir! Wake up, sir!" This woke the giant up. Jack rose to his feet and saw the little boy running away, carrying a large harp with him. "Wait, little boy. You've stolen the chicken, the bag of gold, and the bag of silver, and now you're going to steal the harp too?" the big man roared, chasing after him. "Try and catch me if you can." Jack roared, not giving up, but still trying his best. The big man stumbled along, stomping his drunken feet. Meanwhile, the harp continued to rattle and clank incessantly. Finally, when he reached the top of the beanstalk ladder, Jack said to the harp, "Stop it," and the harp quieted down. Jack picked up the harp and began to climb down the beanstalk ladder. Far below, his mother stood in front of the hut, gazing up at the sky with tearful eyes. Meanwhile, the giant had caught up with him and put his other foot on the ladder. "Mother, don't cry," Jack called from above as loud as he could. "Well, bring me the axe. Hurry, hurry." He couldn't climb for another minute. The giant came groaning and groaning as he climbed up the ladder. Jack was worried. That's that.